Yes, well, the Scottish Government decided to keep the measure that makes secondary school students wear face masks in the classroom for the foreseeable future, with some Scots thinking that it will likely last until 2022. Now, the Government has said that keeping the current rules in place would allow for more time for 12 to 15-year-olds to be vaccinated. Scottish Conservative Education spokesman Oliver Mundell said that the announcement was a massive disappointment to those in the school sector and that pupils, parents and teachers need to see a plan from the SNP for a return to normal learning as soon as possible.
Yes, well, Craig Hoy, the MSP for South Scotland and Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Mental Health and Social Care, joins us now to talk about this. Thanks so much for your time this morning. Do you really think this is going to help in any way?
I think we've got a problem now in Scotland with the SNP government in relation to consistency of the approach they're taking in relation to COVID. If you think about it like this, I mean, what the government have now said is that 12 to 16-year-olds who are getting vaccinated in Scotland, 40% of them are now vaccinated, and must wear masks at school. So when their parents drop them off at school in the morning, they're going to be forced to wear masks all day in the classroom. Meanwhile, their parents can go to a coffee shop or to a pub and sit all day without a mask. Consistency has not been the SNP government's strongest suit throughout COVID, but I think we are now getting to a point where the government should be really open and say, if not now, then when are they going to lift these restrictions? Because yesterday on television, there were young people saying it is actually impeding their learning. In some respects, they were saying they can't even hear the teachers through the teachers' masks. So I'd like the government now just simply to come forward and say, look, they will be removing masks in secondary schools and bringing forward a more normal learning experience for our young people.
I'm deeply, deeply concerned about what I regard as the inevitable looming mental health crisis for young people as a result of coronavirus restrictions, right? So one of those elements is mask wearing. Now, children, especially young children, obviously, do a lot of their learning through facial recognition, essentially, and that's being barred now. You also have a lot of children who do have learning difficulties, you know, things like Asperger's syndrome or autism, etc., 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 that really do, you know, rely on having that kind of visual recognition, and that's gone. Surely, in the name of children's mental health now, we just need to rip these masks off.
COVID has undoubtedly caused a mental health crisis in Scotland. Let's not forget there was a mental health treatment and waiting crisis in Scotland, particularly for young people prior to COVID. But that has got immeasurably worse since the pandemic. Now 1 in 100 children, that's 1 in 100, are now in the queue for treatment through what are known as child and adolescent mental health services here in Scotland. Many are waiting more than 2 years for treatment. And at that age, if you're 12 or 14, 2 years is a very, very significant time to be waiting for treatment. So you're absolutely right. We need to get kids back to normal, get them back to normal in the classroom with the usual process of socialisation, and then hopefully we can start to tackle the looming mental health crisis that is undoubtedly there. But we want to see the Scottish Government get normality back into our classrooms. I think many, many children and their parents want to see the same. For some reason, the Scottish Government seems to have caved into the EIS union in Scotland, but certainly the parents and the pupils that I've spoken to have said they want to see classrooms getting back to normality, particularly given that so many of them have now had the vaccine. That's 40% of them. So we will certainly be continuing to press the Scottish Government for this. It was deeply regrettable that they didn't announce a lifting of the ban when schools come back after the October break. And you're right in your opening segment to say this could now run into 2022, which will clearly have an impact on children's learning and, as you say, possibly their mental health as well.
One thing I'm mystified about is how Nicola Sturgeon keeps winning, right? Because it seems like it's a strange situation up north of the border there, what's going on at the moment. You've got issues such as this one. I refuse to believe that the vast majority of Scots are banging in favour of masks for 12-year-olds. I'm pretty sure that can't be the case. It also looks like things like, you know, facial recognition in the dinner queue, you know, allowing children to reassign their own gender at school without informing the parents. You've got some interesting things taking place in prisons regarding, you know, trans prisoners and inmates going into women's jails, etc., etc., etc. What's happening north of the border? Are people just blind to all of this stuff?
I think people are starting to see through the SNP, whether it's in our schools, our hospitals, our roads, our railways, our prisons, Scotland's competitiveness. The SNP have taken this country backwards over the last 14 years. I mean, they have won the last few elections here in Scotland. They didn't get a majority, though, this time around. Despite the fact that they claim they have a mandate for all sorts of policies, they didn't get a majority. And after the election, they had to do a rather grubby deal with the Greens. And some of the more extreme policies that you're referring to, the pressure for those will be coming from the Green Party here in Scotland, which is a pretty extreme party. So my hope is that as we come out of COVID, people will start to look at the SNP's record and all those key indicators. Look at NHS waiting times. Look at our A&E system, which is in crisis. Look at the poverty-related attainment gap in Scotland, which is getting wider in many respects. The SNP's record is shambolic, and we as a strong opposition fully intend to point that out, whilst also using this Parliament to set out how we could be a strong alternative to the SNP.